Hi everyone.
Hello.
You good?
Yeah.
Right. So today it's the start of a new witness for the state, or I don't know. It's a new witness regardless. Ryan Balch. So, you ready?
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right. You may proceed, Mr. Binger.
Thank you, Judge. The state calls Ryan Balch.
We'll speed up a little bit.
I was getting cold in here again. Well, great. All right.
That's state's witness.
Then yes, ma'am.
Same case, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Would you make sure you pull that microphone close to your mouth and state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Ryan Balch, B-A-L-C-H,
Where do you live currently? What city or town?
Jackson, Wisconsin.
Back in August of 2020, was that where you lived at that time as well?
That is correct.
And how are you currently employed?
I am employed doing manufacturing work.
Now, was there a time in your past where you served in the United States military?
That is correct.
Can you tell us about that, please?
From 2008 to 2013, served in the United States Army as an infantryman. One tour to Iraq, one tour to Afghanistan.
And I want to turn your attention to the night of August 25th, 2020. Did you come down to Kenosha that evening?
I did.
Why?
We had been watching it on the news. Some of the people I knew within the protest group had said that things were rough down there. Somebody made mention of a Facebook post. I didn't really pay attention to that one too much. But in general, we just decided to come down and help out.
When you say we, who are you referring to?
The four people that accompanied me.
What are their names?
Jason Lekowski, Dustin Collette, and there was a female, I didn't know her name.
Prior to that particular night, did you know Dustin Collette and Jason Lekowski?
I had known Jason for about 4 to 5 years, knew Dustin about 3 weeks.
Where you lived in Jackson at the time, where did those other individuals live?
Jason lived in Brown Deer, and Colette lived in West Bend.
Now, you indicated that you'd heard from some protesters that things were rough in Kenosha.
Correct.
When did you hear that?
During the first night of the protests and the riots.
Just so we're clear about when you say the first night.
August 24th.
Okay.
Would have been.
The situation kind of began with the shooting of Jacob Blake on Sunday night, August 23rd.
Correct.
There were incidents that night. Monday night, August 24th. There were incidents that night, and of course Tuesday night, August 25th is the night that we're going to be talking about. Do you remember which of the first two nights it was that you first heard about things? Was it Sunday or Monday?
Anybody I had contact with wasn't down there for the 23rd, so everything I heard about was on the 24th.
Were you personally down here on the 23rd or 24th?
No.
The first time you came down was on Tuesday?
Yes.
And when you traveled down here, you mentioned there were 3 other folks with you, a female, and then Mr. Lekowski and Mr. Collette. Who all traveled together?
I have to back up a little bit. Me and Colette rode together, and the female rode with, I forget the other guy's name that she rode with.
Jason Lekowski?
No, Jason Lekowski came in later in the evening.
I see. Okay. You have identified Dustin Collette and Jason Lekowski as people you already knew.
Yes.
There's a female you
Hang on.
mentioned.
He said that he rode with them. That
Yeah.
they accompanied him.
Yeah.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Dustin, Jason, and a female that he didn't know.
Yeah.
So who's this now 5th person? See, this is the issue that I'm having. It's not. It's so in doubt in my mind. Obviously, I'm not a juror, and I have no legal training whatsoever. But it's like, why would you say those names when only 2 out of the 3 of them accompanied you? But you're saying that those 4 people accompanied you, but 1 came in later. It just doesn't. It just makes him sound like a liar, like he shouldn't be trusted.
Sounds odd.
Well,
Maybe I'm thinking it wrong, but I think it sounds odd.
for me, it's made me not trust the state's case anyway.
Was there anyone else coming down that you knew before this night?
Danton Mertz would be somebody that I knew as well.
And that's Danton Mertz?
Yes.
How long had you known him?
About the same amount of time I'd known Follett.
Just about 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know where he was from?
West Bend.
We'll talk in a minute about where you wound up coming to in Kenosha, but when you were thinking about coming down, when you were driving on down to Kenosha, what was your plan? Where were you going to go?
We really didn't have a set destination. There had been several places that we'd been told might need some help. But when we came in, most of those places were already occupied. So we ended up on Sheridan Road at 63rd and Sheridan.
Do you remember any of those other locations that you'd heard about?
They were car lots. I don't remember specifically the names.
Obviously now you're familiar with Car Source.
Correct.
Prior to coming down to Kenosha, had you ever heard of Car Source before?
I didn't know it existed.
Obviously, had never shopped or worked there before.
No.
Okay. When was it that you first learned anything about Car Source?
When we arrived,
And when you say when you arrived, where exactly did you arrive at?
the Car Source location on 63rd and Sheridan.
Okay. There's a little pen in front of you, right in front of you, sir.
Yep.
And if you push the button near the end, there's a laser pointer. Can you, on that map behind you, can you identify that location for us? Okay. And that's the Car Source at the northwest corner of 63rd and Sheridan, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, you indicated you arrived there. You've identified some other folks that were coming down with you. Did they all come to that location too?
Everyone but Jason Lekowski.
And you mentioned he arrived later.
Right.
Okay. So in this initial group, you've identified Dustin Collette, Danton Mertz, an unknown female, and yourself. Is that right?
That is correct.
And all of you wound up starting at that Car Source.
That is correct.
Tell us what happened when you arrived there.
When we arrived, we encountered, there were 5 individuals on the car lot at the time. One guy was working for the hospital, and he was in full military issue gear. And there was Kyle and his friends there as well. I talked to the guy who worked for the hospital for a few minutes. Then we went over and talked to Kyle and his friends.
And when you say Kyle, you mean the defendant Kyle Rittenhouse.
That is correct.
Do you remember the names of his friends?
I remember Nathan and Dominic.
And what happened then?
We asked them what their plan was, what they were doing. They kind of explained that they worked for the Car Source facility. And then they described that there were 3 other locations. And then at that point, the owner to Car Source showed up.
Did you speak with that person?
I did not.
Do you know that person's name?
I have no idea.
What did you do next?
We kind of, at that point, several vans pulled up full of people. They got out. Most of them, there was one guy who was armed similar to the way we were. The rest were armed with bats, and one of them had like an axe. So melee type stuff. They were there to brawl. They came over to talk to us. The guy and Kit came and talked to me. They agreed to stay at the location on 63rd and Sheridan, and we were going to go to 59th and Sheridan.
I want to ask a couple of clarification questions. First of all, you said some of the folks were, I think you said dressed like you or equipped like you. I'm not sure how you phrased it, but can you tell us what you mean by that?
The one guy that I spoke to was running a plate carrier carrying an AR-15.
Okay.
Sorry, wearing what?
I'm sorry. A plate carrier, body armor, and carrying an AR-15.
Did you have body armor on?
I did.
And you were carrying an AR-15?
This is correct.
This other person you talked to, were they ex-military like you, do you remember?
They said that they had worked for Blackwater.
And that's a private security contractor?
That's a private security contractor.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned, you said vans, I think, more than one?
Correct. There were 2 vehicles at least that showed up.
Do you know where those folks came from?
I didn't question them.
Had you ever seen or met any of those folks before?
No.
Other than the people you've described coming down with, Dustin Collette, Danton Mertz, the unknown female, and later on Jason Lekowski.
Right.
Other than those folks, the people you encountered on this particular evening, either at this location or elsewhere, had you met any of them before?
No.
Obviously.
So then how would he know Carl's name?
Yeah.
And how would he know that Carl was with his friends? Carl and his friends. How would he know that they're friends? I don't know. It doesn't seem like the type of situation where you'd stand around and, go into life like, oh yeah, no, these are my friends, name.
And it's not a tea party, so to say.
Yeah, it... with the fact that, so I've mentioned this before, there's, I think it's Nathan DeBruin where he basically made the state look like the smarmy dicks that they are. But he basically showed him a picture of Kyle and said, "Do you recognize this guy?" No. This is Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay. Binger. So this is Binger. Witness tampering. Right? Took the picture away. Then brought it back and said, "Do you know who this is?" And then Nathan DeBrewer went, "Yeah, that's Kyle Rittenhouse." So they wrote that down, that he knew who the defendant was. I kind of wonder if they did the same with this guy.
Yeah.
To me, it's just not... if you've never met them, I would completely understand. But it's just the way that they're phrasing the questions. It's like... So, the fact that Binger asked Ryan how long he had known the people that he drove down with, and then ignored the fact, asked questions around basically not asking him, had you ever met Kyle before? Did you until that night, did you know Kyle? Did you know the defendant? No. Completely ignore that bit. It seems like he's getting into it now, but it just doesn't. Why would you phrase it that way? You're going through all these people, and you're getting him to list everyone that was there, and how long he had known them. Why didn't you do that with Kyle? It's disingenuous, but I don't... Maybe I'm just reading far too much into it.
No. Binger.
Binger.
Let's say Binger is a lawyer that I would see on Amber's side.
Well, to me, he literally gives the impression of a state prosecutor. It's smarmy, slimy, wormy, just will basically
sell his own kids to get his way through.
It's just it's just smarmy.
Obviously, never met the defendant before?
No.
Had no idea who he was before that night?
Nope.
Okay.
Good, I'm glad you asked that question, finally.
You mentioned that one of the folks that came in the vans was similarly equipped as you, and then the rest had different types of, I think you could characterize them as melee weapons. Would that be fair to say?
That would be fair to say.
Meaning not guns such as handguns or shotguns or AR-15s?
Correct.
And I believe you said that at some point there was an understanding that those folks that came in the vans would stay at 63rd Street Car Source, and some of you, including yourself, would go up to the 59th Street Car Source. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
What time of day was this when you were having this encounter at the 63rd Street Car
It was
Source?
approximately 7:30 p.m.
You were aware that the city of Kenosha had a curfew that night at 8 p.m., correct?
Correct.
You intended to stay past the curfew time. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
I know you mentioned earlier something about hearing about the prior night's events, things like that. Maybe I asked this, and you may have given me a little bit of an answer, but what were you actually intending to do physically? What were you actually going to do when you got here to Kenosha?
The intent when we got down there was to stop the people from looting and rioting and whatnot. Most of the protesters that I talked to before coming down there were trying to control them throughout the night, and it just wasn't working. So we were there to be more of a deterrence than anything.
What were you going to do yourself, personally, to accomplish that goal?
Pretty much tell people to stop. Just throughout the night it kind of proved out that we didn't have to actually do anything to not have them do it, just us being there. It seemed to work, and that was kind of my intent the whole time, was to just be there, be seen, and to deter people from doing that.
You mentioned your AR-15 and your body armor that you were wearing. Beyond that, what sort of equipment did you bring along to assist you maybe not stuff you actually used, but things you brought along in preparation for this night.
Dustin Collette had brought some pepper spray grenades with him, and he kind of handed those out.
We've seen photographs of you and videos of you, which we'll get to in a little bit. It appears that you've got maybe a utility belt on or something like that. I don't know. Can you tell us in your own words what other things you had on your body in terms of equipment?
I had extra ammunition and extra medical equipment.
Any other types of weapons or self-defense equipment on you?
Had a Glock 17 handgun, ammunition for that. But as far as a less than lethal option, no.
You talked about your desire to serve as a deterrent to people. What was it about you or your actions that you thought would work as a deterrent?
Typically the people that were, and from what I've been told by the protesters and stuff, they were selecting places that were unguarded, that there was nobody there, that they could just go in and do what they needed, light it on fire, take whatever they wanted, and roll out after that. So figured just being there would be enough.
If just being there was enough, why did you bring along an AR-15, a handgun, and wear body armor?
Well, because those people could be armed too. If I'm going to get shot, I'd rather have body armor on, first and foremost. And I would like to be able to defend myself from it as well.
So is it fair to say that coming down to Kenosha that night, you were prepared for the possibility that there would be gunfire?
That's correct.
You were prepared to use your gun to defend yourself?
That is correct.
Were you planning on using the gun to protect the property that you were guarding?
No.
So, for example, we know that you were at the 59th Street car source for a lot of the evening. If you had seen someone attempting to damage a vehicle, would you have used your gun and fired at that person to protect that property?
No.
Yeah, but neither did Kyle.
No.
So, what?
What's he going with there?
Yeah. Like, what? What? Okay. Carl was only in that area because the police wouldn't let him go around. That's the only reason why he was there. He was trying to get back to his friends. And then a lunatic started chasing him. With how difficult it is to prove a self-defense claim. Like, how dumb do you have to be as a prosecutor? Like, oh God, this guy.
At any point that evening, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I'm trying to get to a point here. Did you go inside the 59th Street car source?
A couple of times, yes.
What was inside there?
Several cars that were being worked on, some tables, some chairs.
Was there a living quarters or an apartment or anything like that where someone was able to sleep or live?
Not that I saw, but I did see that it was attached to a gas station.
Do you know if the gas station was open and in business at that time?
When we walked by, it appeared to be in business.
But it's fair to say that no one was living here. This was all business property. Fair
That
to
is
say?
fair to say.
As opposed to a house or an apartment.
That is fair to say.
If there had been any sort of damage to the building, the car source building, such as being lit on fire or rocks thrown at it or anything like that, would that have caused an injury or a death to a person?
Had the fire spread to the residential buildings behind it, yes.
Okay. At any point in this evening, did anyone try and start a fire at that car source location?
Later on in the evening, they tried to start a dumpster on fire, and before that, they tried to light the church next door on fire.
And that's the church that's to the north across 59th Street?
Correct.
Okay. The dumpster that was attempted to be started on fire was actually located in the street when that event occurred. Is that
Correct.
right?
They pulled it off the parking lot area of car source and lit it on fire in the street.
So rather than try and light the fire where the dumpster is in the car source lot, they took it out in the road and then lit it on fire.
Correct.
And I believe that's where, at some point that evening, Dustin Collette goes out and puts the fire out.
That is correct.
Okay. I skipped around a little bit there. I want to go back to where we were. I believe you were describing how there was vans that met at 63rd. There was some sort of understanding that they would stay there, and you and others would go up to the 59th Street car source. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
What did you do after that?
I went across the street to the hospital where the other guy had gone. I met their guy they had watching the gate, and I didn't wholly trust the people who had agreed to stay down at 63rd. So I gave him my cell phone number and said, hey, if these guys leave or somebody starts breaking stuff, call us.
Did you ever get a call that night?
No.
What did you do after that?
We kind of gathered up. I think we took a picture, and then we went up to 59th.
When you say we went up to 59th, who all came along with you?
That would have been Dustin, the female, Danton Mertz, Kyle Rittenhouse, Dominic, and Nathan.
Other than the folks you just mentioned, did anyone else come along that you can recall?
Not that I can recall.
Is it fair to say that when you first got to the 59th Street location, the people you just mentioned was the group that was there protecting that property?
Yes.
I know Jason Lukowski comes later. Other than him, was anyone else there that night at 59th Street that may have arrived later to help with what you were doing?
Some family members from Kyle's friends showed up.
Do you remember who they were?
One of them was one of their fathers. There was somebody else that came through. They were there for 5-10 minutes and they left. I didn't know who that was.
Do you remember approximately what time it was when you got up to the 59th Street car source location?
We crossed 60th right as the sirens went off at 8 p.m. So we arrived at 59th around 8:01, 8:02.
Where did you position yourself at that point?
I stayed on the ground outside in the car lot area. Most of the cars were burned out at that point. And some of the guys went up on the roof, and some of us stayed down on the ground level.
Now, you mentioned earlier you met the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse, that evening.
Correct.
And that was first at the 63rd Street car source, right?
Yes.
And then he came along up to the 59th Street car source.
Yes.
Did he ever tell you how old he was?
We asked the group when we first got there. They looked kind of young, and the general consensus was 19.
Not sure what you mean by general consensus. Is that something the defendant actually said?
It seemed like as a group they were saying it, and I didn't ask. I was just kind of off to the side when that conversation happened.
After everything happened on August 25th, you met with an FBI agent by the name of Tim Walther at your residence up in Jackson. Do you remember that?
I do.
And do you remember him talking to you about this particular night?
Yes.
And do you remember telling him, and I'm going to quote from your statement here, Rittenhouse told Balch that he was 19. However, Balch thought he was younger. Do you remember saying that to the agent?
I do.
Did the defendant say anything else to you about himself or his qualifications or anything like that?
Early on in the night, no.
Is it fair to say that as the night went on, while you were on the ground in front of the 59th Street car source, the defendant was also in that proximity area?
That is correct.
Were there times during the evening when you would chat with him about various things?
That is correct.
What was your impression of the defendant?
He seemed like a young and impressionable kid. They use that term kind of broadly there. Someone way younger than myself. He seemed to be really interested in what I had done in life. When Jason Lukowski showed up, he seemed to be interested in what he had done in life. He had explained some of the stuff he had been doing, the lifeguard, being EMT certified, stuff like that.
So the defendant told you that he was a certified EMT
This is correct.
and that he was 19 years old.
This is correct.
You look like you had something to say. Bless you.
That was what I was thinking of saying.
Ah, good words.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I mean, he does. So, Kyle will explain this when he gets on the stand, but he did have like a certification. It's not like an EMT thing.
No.
I think it's like a level above first aid.
Yeah.
I think. I'm not 100% sure, but it had lapsed. I think like a couple of months or something just before this all happened.
Yeah.
Maybe even a couple of weeks. I'm not sure, but it's just like. I mean, he's 17 for fuck's sake. Of course he's gonna lie.
Oh yeah.
Find me a fucking teenager that you think has never lied, and I'll show you a liar.
Oh yeah. Hey, we can take any. We can start off with bars to start with.
It just doesn't. Cool. He said he was a certified EMT. Maybe because he wanted to feel important because he's a teenager, and he's witnessing his town being fucked up,
Mm.
and he's with, you know, a group of people that he doesn't know.
Of course, yeah.
Like, God. Like, I do partly understand that it's like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. But then again, he's 17, he shouldn't have been there in the first place.
No, he shouldn't.
Oh, God.
It's like,
I've said this so many times, but I do wonder how his mother felt.
yeah. But like you said, any teenagers, we got a teenager trying to get alcohol. They say that they are at a certain age. Then we got
You look at
bars.
them and you're like, uh-huh,
Yeah.
sure.
Then we got bars and attractions and shit.
Yeah.
It's like, of course they're gonna lie because.
Well, they want to be. I mean, definitely when I was a teenager, you wanted so much to be an adult, to be taken seriously, because you weren't. You're just being a teenager. It's just hormones. Like you wanted to be taken seriously.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, in this situation, you know, heightened awareness, people that are already done damage, property damage, and not there for any positive reason, especially at that, like, the later on it got. It's like, yeah.
I mean, he was cleaning up the day before, and he'd see the shit in first hand, what's going on. Of course, he's like,
Yeah.
this isn't right. I need to. I want to help. Kind of.
But the thing is, though, is that because he's 17, so for me, a lot of not blame, but responsibility goes to his parents.
Yeah.
They should have made it extremely clear, you're not going to this. I
Yeah.
understand you might want to, and it's terrible what's going on, but you're a teenager. You don't know who's out there. What happens if you get hurt?
Yeah.
What happens if you die? Like, it's the parents' responsibility to keep their kid safe, and they let him go out.
Yeah.
I mean, I partly want to think that maybe he snuck out. I just don't think so. I think he just was like, I'm going out. Okay. And just whoosh. It's
Yeah.
just completely like it's. I just want to. I want to know what his mum is thinking.
Yeah.
Like, what is running through her head, because the amount of scrutiny that she would have got,
Oh yeah.
and that she did get during this, it's not going to be anywhere close to what she's thinking about herself. And I'd be so interested to know how she feels about it.
Yeah.
Because that was her son. Her son's life, her family's life is completely changed.
Oh yeah. I mean, Kyle got marked from this, and that's not gonna go away.
Well, it sucks though.
Yeah.
Like, he's always going to have this level of heightened awareness. Because there's, even during this, there was people that were on his side, and you know, there's people that wanted him dead.
Yeah.
And you know, he's always going to have this fear of when someone's looking at him, even as he gets older, they'll look at him like, I recognize him, but I don't know where from. And it's just not. Hopefully, he has, you know, ways to deal with that. And it doesn't affect him, but the majority of people, I would assume it does.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to this.
What did you think about the defendant being there that night?
He had as much right as anybody else to be there.
Did it seem like he was properly equipped or prepared to be out there doing what he was doing that night?
He seemed a little under-equipped, and under-experienced as well, which is one of the reasons we kind of stayed with him.
When you say we stayed with him, who do you mean?
Danton Mertz, Dustin Collette, and the female.
Did you feel like you needed to keep an eye on the defendant?
He seemed like it. Yes and no. I felt like, as young as he looked, and the way he was, just the general way he was carrying himself, the protesters would have seen that as a weakness and tried to exploit that.
Is it fair to say that you took it upon yourself that evening to stay close to the defendant to ensure there were no problems?
We pretty much all picked one of the guys that we met at 63rd and kind of looked out for him, yes.
And you personally picked the defendant?
It's kind of more of a he picked me kind of thing.
At any rate, it turned out that you spent a lot of the evening close by the defendant. Fair enough?
That is fair.
Okay. One of the things that the defendant was asking you about was your military experience. Is that right?
This is correct.
What did you tell him about that?
I just told him about the various deployments and what I'd done while I was there.
Now, you mentioned earlier that when you arrived at the 59th Street car source, it was a little after 8 o'clock, a little after curfew. Can you describe for us what the scene was at that location at that time?
Most of the cars in the parking area had been burned out. The building itself had been boarded up pretty good. You could see some evidence on the side of the building where people had thrown things at it to try to start it on fire. But other than that, typical looked like a war zone, is what I would say.
What about the street in front, Sheridan Road, in that area? Were there a lot of people around at that point?
At the time, it was mostly law enforcement and people similar to us milling around. We had an occasional group of protesters coming through.
Now, there are, on that particular evening, there are protests that were going on in Kenosha. Were you aware of that at the time?
Yes, we could see them up by the courthouse from that position.
Is it fair to say that when you first got to Car Source, most of the protesters and most of the protest was north of your location?
That is correct.
Closer to Civic Center Park, which is right out in front of the courthouse?
That is correct.
Did there come a time in which the crowd started to come down closer to the 59th Street Car Source?
Before the police started to push them towards us, there were some folks that came through. Most of them were carrying fire extinguishers and said they were putting out fires and whatnot.
You mentioned the police pushing them to you. Did there come a time when that happened?
Yes.
I've seen statements at various times where you have talked about hearing the police say something about what the plan was or what they were intending to do. Did you ever talk to any law enforcement officer that
Yes.
night? And did they tell you something about what the plan was?
Yeah, right before, I want to say around 9 p.m., me and Kyle were walking down to the Ultimate gas station, and we encountered a female deputy. And she told us, hey, we're getting ready to start pushing them down, you guys. Once that happens, it's kind of going to be on you guys. And she got in her patrol car and left.
Who was that person?
I didn't get a name.
So your understanding was that the police were going to move all these protesters into your area and give you the job of taking care of them?
She didn't insinuate that so much as it seemed like what was likely going to happen.
Do you know what the rank of this person was that you spoke to? Was this a captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant, anything like that?
I didn't see any rank.
Other than that, did you speak with any other law enforcement officers about this notion?
No,
Okay. And you said the defendant witnessed that.
that's correct.
And I believe you mentioned that was around 9 o'clock?
It would have been around 9 o'clock.
Had the police already pushed the protesters down your way at that point, or did that come later?
That came a little bit later. They started pushing them around 9:30, 10.
Okay. So I want to talk about the time period from when you first got to 59th at around 8 or so, and that time at 9:30 or 10 when the protesters start getting pushed down your way. So
Sure.
there's an hour and a half, maybe 2 hour period of time.
Okay.
During that time period, where were you located?
For the most part, 59th.
Was the defendant also there?
That's correct.
What were you doing?
We were just kind of standing around talking. A couple of times, some of the protesters came over and told us that, hey, some people are trying to set this building on fire, so we'd go over there, and when we'd show up, they'd run away. That's around the time that we were told they were trying to light the church on fire. And at that point, we were told it was a bald guy with a red shirt.
So let me stop you for a second. You indicated that there were times in which you received reports that someone was trying to start something on fire, and you said we would go over there. Who's we?
It was a mix each time.
Did the defendant ever go?
He went with us at least once when we went over to the Stella when they were trying to break the windows out over there.
Okay. So tell me what you remember about that.
So the same protesters that were carrying fire extinguishers before, they were from Kenosha. They had stopped and talked with us quite a bit. In fact, we'd helped them carry somebody from up at the protest back beyond the police so they could take him to the hospital. And the defendant helped with that as well. They came running down because there were, in their words, there were people trying to break into the Stella and light it on fire. Somebody had pointed a gun at them, and the cops weren't around. So we headed across the other car source facility, across the way into the burned out cars, and there were 3 to 4 subjects breaking out windows on the Stella and just milling around over there. And once we got to within 100 yards of them, I believe it was Colette yelled out at them. They turned and saw us and they ran off.
You were one of the...
Now, let's remember, it was mostly peaceful.
Yeah.
The only crime that happened was Carl shooting a pedophile. No one was doing anything. And let's also not forget, being that who would be prosecuting these people, he's not brought any case of criminal damage against any of them. Where's that? Why is that? Oh wait, it's because it doesn't fit the narrative that they're going for.
Nope.
They tried to use Carl as an example and it just didn't work.
People along with Dustin Collette that went over there?
That's correct.
Who else went with you?
I want to say that Kyle was with us and one of the protesters who had told us about it.
So, I understand no one wants windows broken out or fire started or anything like this, but what gave you the right to go around and police that area?
Well, there were members of the community that asked us to go help them.
Who?
These 4 protesters.
Well, those you characterized as folks walking with fire extinguishers. Were they from the Stella?
They came from that direction.
Were they employed by the Stella?
I didn't ask.
Is it fair to say you heard a report that somebody was up to no good and you decided to head over there and stop it?
Correct.
Other than that, you don't know anything more about what was going on?
No.
And these people you saw milling about at the Stella, do you know who they were?
One was one of them was fairly tall. The rest of the people seemed to be about average height or shorter.
Beyond that description of their height, do you know anything else about them?
No, we didn't get that close.
Don't know where they came from?
Nope.
Don't know their names?
Nope.
Don't know where they went afterwards?
Nope.
Don't know what their affiliation, if any, was with the Stella? Right?
I would assume they weren't affiliated with the Stella.
I would assume somebody breaking the Stella's windows is probably not. I agree with that. But my point is you're making an assumption
Correct.
with less than perfect information.
That is correct.
You mentioned a fire at the St. James. Was that at the St. James Church?
This church right here.
Now, can you just put your pointer back up right where you were doing? This is a satellite photograph of Kenosha that's a little older. There's a building that you're pointing at right now. On the night of August 25th, 2020, that building wasn't standing anymore, was it?
No.
There was a pile of
There
rubble?
was rubble right here, but there's another building right in there.
Okay. The church itself is actually on the other end of the north end of the block along 58th Street. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. When you mentioned something about a fire or somebody trying to start a fire at that location. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, the same individuals that told us about the Stella showed up again, and they described a female, 2 males trying to light a fire at the church.
What did you do?
We kind of just walked around the street to kind of look around there. When we got there, we could see somebody on the front of the church. They saw us. They ran off.
Did you see anything more than that one person?
No.
Did you see what that person was doing?
No.
Did you see a fire?
No.
Did you put out a fire?
No.
We've talked about, and again, I started this with asking you about that 8 o'clock to 9:30 or 10 o'clock period of time, and you've described a couple of things, the Stella incident, the St. James incident. So beyond that, what other things were you doing in that period of time?
We were walking down to 63rd to check it out. At that point, we'd figured out that the folks that said they were going to stay there no longer stayed there. So onesies and two at a time, people were going down there to check on it. Then they would go over to the Ultimate, check on the guys over there, see what they were doing. and then circle back and come back.
We've seen some photos and videos of the Ultimate gas station. Would it be fair to say that there were people protecting that location that were similar to your group, armed with long rifles, things like that?
That is correct.
And you mentioned that whatever these vans were with these folks with melee weapons at 63rd, at some point in the evening you found out they weren't there anymore?
That is correct.
I want to ask more specifically about that. Was that something that you personally found out or you heard from someone else?
I kind of just heard it through discussion that there was nobody down there anymore.
When you heard that, how many people were in your group guarding the 59th Street location at that point?
It would have been around 7 or 8.
And you said you would send groups of 2 people at a time to go down to 63rd?
That's correct.
Were you ever one of those folks?
Yes.
Was the defendant?
Yes.
What was going on when you went down there?
When we went down that way, there was nobody down there. A couple of the folks that had been down there initially had moved over to the Ultimate. That seemed to be where they had kind of ganged up, but the folks with the melee stuff had kind of gone.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding you. You said a couple of the folks that were at the 63rd Street car source initially wound up going over to the Ultimate gas station?
That is correct.
Were those folks that came in those vans?
One of them came at the same time the vans did.
Okay. So one of the people that came at the same time as the vans did wound up at Ultimate Gas.
That is correct.
Hang on. So, the ones that are at 63rd, they didn't really leave. They went over to the Ultimate gas station because the ones with the melee weapons left. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's the impression I'm getting. And also, I find it interesting that they literally set up a patrol.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wise.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was me, I would want like 3 or 4.
Oh yeah, but since it's America, I'm not entirely sure, but I think you can you're allowed to have a unweaponized armored car. Could have that as a patrol.
Yeah, but I don't. How would you even get that through the crowds of people?
That's true.
And you got to remember, at this time they were smashing cars.
Yeah. Therefore, an armored one.
Yeah, but would you really want to be stuck in that?
No.
I wouldn't. Although, to be honest, if they got hostile, I would much rather be in a car.
Yeah.
But it seems like they weren't, so it was like it kind of seems like what happened with most other places that had protests during the day, that it looks like at this point it's turning into the more aggressive, violent, not even protesters, but rioters.
Yeah.
That they're turning up.
Mm.
And it sounds like there may have been more than just one person from 63rd that wound up at Ultimate Gas?
There was one other guy that was with him when we showed up.
Okay. So, is it fair to say that, speaking for you personally, Mr. Balch, you felt like it was part of your responsibility to not only guard the 59th Street car source, but also the 63rd Street car source?
That is correct.
Which is why you and other folks were going down there to check on it?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to continue talking about that 8 o'clock to 9:30 or 10 o'clock period. We've talked about a few things. Other than that, what else were you doing during that period of time?
Mostly we were just kind of talking to people when they would walk by. We didn't really have any negative encounters during that period of time. You'd get the occasional person wanting to have a debate and whatnot, but most of it was just walking down to 63rd, somebody coming and saying somebody's trying to light something on fire, go check it out, come back, wash, rinse, repeat.
Okay. So now you've mentioned there was a time when the police started to move the protesters in your direction, and I think you said earlier that was around 9:30 or 10 o'clock?
This is correct.
Okay. Tell us about that.
As soon as they started pushing the protesters, we started getting the the people who weren't intending on participating in a riot, I should say, started kind of drifting down towards us. They were shouting insults at us, and some of the other members of the group were having back and forths with them. I spent the large majority of that time trying to calm people down and just keep them moving down the street. Then we started encountering people who were more and more aggressive, and the cops would push them, then they would back off, Then they'd come back and push him again, and they would push him further south each time. Or, yeah, that's south.
When you describe these interactions with the people walking past, was the defendant present for any of that?
He had one exchange that I saw.
Who was that with?
Just some random person in the crowd screamed, "Fuck you."
At the defendant?
Yes.
How did the defendant react to that?
He said, "I love you too, ma'am."
That was good. I love you too, ma'am.
I think it's man. I think
Yeah.
the one who shouted "fuck you" is actually Joseph Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that there was some sort of report of...
Hang on, was that the judge laughing?
Yes.
How did the defendant react to that?
He said, "I love you too, ma'am."
Someone. I think that might be the judge that just laughed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because where he's looking is where the judge is. Like this one here. And like the judge's mic isn't on, but you can hear it.
You mentioned earlier that there was some sort of report of someone in a red shirt with bald head who was reported to be involved in some sort of incident. I think I heard you mention that as well.
Yes.
We now know with the benefit of hindsight who Joseph Rosenbaum was, and we've seen photographs of him in a red shirt and a bald head. Let me start by asking of someone in a red shirt with bald head who was reported to be involved in some sort of incident. I think I heard you mention that as well.
Yes.
We now know with the benefit of hindsight who Joseph Rosenbaum was, and we've seen photographs of him in a red shirt and a bald head. Let me start by asking, whatever report you heard regarding Mr. Rosenbaum at that particular time, did you ever see him at that time?
I'd seen someone fitting the description, kind of milling in and out of the groups that were coming through. Every time he was around the groups, now that I know who Joseph Rosenbaum was and can confirm who he was and stuff, he was not organic with the protesters.
What do you mean by that?
They didn't seem comfortable with his presence or the people that were with him.
Who was with him?
Oh.
He had a male and a female that were with him pretty much consistently throughout the night.
So you saw those folks together?
Yes.
Him and the male and the female. Did you ever see them speaking to one another?
The male and the female, yes, but as far as them talking to him directly, no.
So you never saw Mr. Rosenbaum talk to that male or female?
No.
And you never saw the male and female talk to Mr. Rosenbaum?
No.
But you saw them in proximity to one another, so you're making some sort of assumption that they had some sort of association. Is that fair to say?
The mob
I saw him.
uncomfortable with him.
In close proximity with each other several times, which led to that assumption.
Okay. Tell us about the first time that you observed Mr. Rosenbaum.
The first time he was just getting aggravated with someone in the crowd, and the protesters were trying to separate him from whoever that was, and he was shouting, "fuck you" kind of things to everyone, and they kind of walked off. And one of the things that stood out to me was the tall male that was with him had a handgun in his hand, with the finger on the trigger, pointed down to the ground.
Now, you had an AR-15,
This is correct.
and you had your hand on the butt of that AR-15.
No.
At no point?
Hand on the grip with the fingers straight forward along the side of the receiver.
I misspoke when I
Yeah.
said butt. I mean, the grip, the pistol grip of the AR-15, you had your hand on that with your finger not on the trigger, but within close proximity. Fair
That
to
is
say?
correct.
Okay. And this individual had a handgun
Right.
with his finger on the trigger.
This is correct.
And that caused you to be concerned of some sort of what?
Well, you're typically taught not to put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot. The way he was holding it, had anybody bumped into him or him tripped and fell, he would have been sending a round off into who knows what. So I just saw it as unsafe.
And the potential for some sort of tragic accident.
Correct, or he was prepared for something.
Did you ever see him point that gun at anyone?
No.
Did you ever see him fire that gun?
No.
And obviously you had a gun that was bigger and more powerful than his. Fair to say?
This is fair to say.
We'll finish this.
You're familiar with AR-15s.
This is correct.
How long had you owned your AR-15?
Since 2012.
So 8 years.
Yes.
And over that period of time, how many times had you fired your AR-15?
By August of 2020, I probably had somewhere close to 10 to 15,000 rounds through it.
And what type of ammo? What did it take? What caliber?
5.56.
And are you familiar with the term full metal jacket?
This is correct.
And is that the type of ammo you would use?
Yes.
And can you, as a military former infantryman in the Army who's fired 10 to 15,000 rounds, can you tell us a little bit about what full metal jacket bullets are?
FMJ, full metal jacket bullets are just a solid copper jacket around a lead core. There's nothing really particularly special about it. It's not particularly more dangerous than any other type of ammunition. In the state of Wisconsin, you're not allowed to hunt with full metal jacket ammunition.
Do you know why that is?
Penetration, over penetration.
What does that mean?
FMJ versus hollow points. Hollow points are designed to hit the target and expand and transfer the energy. A full metal jacket's not designed to do that. So, depending on what it hits, it can just sail right on through.
So it's fair to say that a full metal jacket round fired from an AR-15 has the potential for hitting whatever it's shot at, say a deer, for example, and going through that and continuing on to something down the line.
It can.
As opposed to a hollow point, which typically hits a deer, for example, and then stops.
Yes.
Oh, did Dana re-explain exactly what the guy said, but worse? I'm I've forgotten about that. The fact that Rosenbaum was going around these crowds causing problems everywhere.
Yeah.
And who was it? Anthony Huber that he was with? I don't think it was it?
I think he.
There was two people. So, I'm trying to think. There was two people. So when Carl was getting chased by Joseph, there was a round that was let off. That Carl thought it was Joseph that let it off, right? That's why he turned around and shot, because he thought he was getting shot at by the guy chasing him.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure that the guy that shot that one round that caused Joseph Rosenbaum to get shot himself, that guy was with a woman, and I'm wondering if they were the two that Ryan saw.
Yeah.
And also, why would they didn't talk to him, but they were essentially following him everywhere. I wonder if because Joseph Rosenbaum, he had already been arrested at the very least for diddling kids.
Yeah.
I wonder if they recognised him and was keeping an eye on him because they knew he was unhinged.
Yeah. That plus he was.
Causing arguments in the groups.
Yeah. So they were keeping an eye. That's mostly why they kept an eye on him.
I don't know. If it was, if they had been there from, like, if they had seen him, and they recognised what he looked like. So much so that someone like Ryan, for example, who was in multiple places seeing, possibly hundreds of people. So much so that he would recognise not just Joseph Rosenbaum, with hindsight being given the name, but also the fact that he noticed and remembered two people within the exact same proximity with him several times. I mean, it could just be coincidence, but it is a bit weird. That's, I had completely forgotten about that, the fact that he was essentially Joseph Rosenbaum wanted to kill someone, or at the very least fight somebody.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Carl's really quite lucky then.
Oh yeah. If Kyle didn't have the gun, if Kyle didn't have the gun there to defend himself, he would be dead. There is no question for it. Rosenborg probably have done something else as well, but
it's also the fact that Carl had the awareness around him to notice someone running up on him.
Yeah.
In a crowd of people. Like that is for me that's quite interesting. And also the fact that Richard McGuinness, who was right there, observed the fact that Joseph Rosenbaum tried to grab the gun.
Yeah.
Not once, but twice.
Yeah.
Because there was one weird gun residue, I think, on his thumb or something.
Yeah.
Which normally means his thumb is quite close to the barrel.
Yeah.
I reckon if Joseph Rosenbaum had got that, he would have killed Carl, like you said. He would have killed him.
Oh yeah. Then he probably would have done something worse also.
I hope not, with the amount of people there. But you never know.
No, with what they're describing him, what he's among the group, I have a feeling.
I think a lot of people were watching him, and I think that's why when Joseph Rosenbaum started chasing Carl, people started. Remember in that video, the FBI one, which they still never explained why the FBI was there. But it showed people giving suit, like following, like basically mob mentality, you know, doing the same thing. And then it's as if they realised, oh no, that's the lunatic that was causing problems. Fuck that, I'm not chasing that guy.
Yeah.
So then they stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just guessing, but that's, with that bit of information, that's kind of what it seems like.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna go now. So we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, leave your comments down below if you have any. And hopefully we'll see you in the next video. If not, enjoy whatever you do. Stay hydrated. Wear sunscreen.
Beware of secrets. Beware of the secret. The secret seagulls.
Yes. I mean, also it's snowing here, so.
They're hiding in the snow.
They are the snow. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.